Alpine head into the final race of the season as the only team alongside Red Bull to be fighting for absolutely nothing. They sit slap bang in the middle of the standings in 6th, with a 92-point gap to Williams behind them, and a gap to Aston Martin in front of them that's more than double the points that they already have. The one constant throughout the Alpine Renault era is that they always seem to generate more noise and attention off the track than they do on it. And 2023 has been no different. After last year's Alonso Piastri fiasco, this year we saw Otmar Szafnauer getting sacked with a mid-season managerial shakeup, and big celebrity names invest in Alpine, with Renault giving away a 24% share in the team. And now what this means for their future in terms of performance is still very unclear. What is clear is that parent company Renault didn't want to invest any more money into Alpine, and so to them it seemed like a fair trade to give away 24% share of their equity in turn for investment. But with the team still being called Alpine, they still keep 100% of the brand exposure. Earlier in the year, Sportico valued the Alpine F1 team to be worth over $1 billion. And it feels like Alpine wanted to cash in on the boom that Formula 1 seems to be going through. With an 11th team potentially coming into the sport, there's no doubt that it's going to have some kind of impact on the value of the other teams. And whilst it's easy to feel like if you have a house, for example, to give a more relatable example, that the price is only ever going to go up, that's a very naive thing to believe, and the same thing goes for Formula 1 teams. How the management will use this new investment and who the management is even going to be long term are two really big questions. In Formula 1, of course you need the money, but you also need to have the right people behind the money and stability within the team, which after 4 different team principals in 4 years, Alpine just hasn't had. Alpine are always going to be a respectable team because the actual people working at Enstone are very good. For the past 4 or 5 years, they've always been a solid and consistent midfield team who have been capable of challenging for podiums, and they've operated in this really weird space where they've never been so bad that they've fallen into the backmarker conversation with the likes of Williams and Haas, but they've also never been able to make that jump to even be close to the likes of Mercedes or Ferrari. Ironically, their big target coming into the season was to do exactly that. Off the back of a very decent start to these new generation of cars, their goal was to be closer to the teams fighting up at the front compared to last year. And whilst statistically on raw performance they have been closer to Ferrari and Mercedes, they have also let McLaren and Aston Martin jump them in the process. It feels like the very definition of 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Coincidentally, just as I was researching and writing this video, Pat Fry, who was the chief technical officer at the team after joining in 2020 and who left for Williams during the summer break, opened up on why he chose to willingly go to a team further down the grid, and I think he summarized exactly what I felt about Alpine, saying, "I didn't feel that there was the enthusiasm or drive to move forward beyond 4th. I decided at the start of March that I want to be pushing things forward. I don't just want to sit there and not be able to do things. So for me, that was the time to stop and move on really. As a company, they weren't almost set up to push hard enough. You can say you want to be first, but the difference between saying it and achieving it is monumental. The thing that excites me about this opportunity is that the board is fully on board with what it's going to take to move this place forward. They're willing to invest what it takes and support us in building a team." And now, luckily for Alpine, it's not all doom and gloom because, to their credit, I have always felt like they've had pretty decent drivers. Even going back to their Renault days with Hülkenberg and Sainz, then bringing in Ricciardo in 2019, Ocon in 2020, Alonso in 2021, and then Gasly in 2023. To be honest, in terms of driver quality, any combination of those drivers is going to be a pretty strong lineup. Having said that, the fact that they haven't had the same driver lineup for more than 2 years also tells me that once those drivers got there, they realized very quickly that they didn't have long-term futures there. Sainz left after 1 season, Ricciardo announced that he was leaving after 1 season as well, and Alonso and Piastri willingly decided to leave for teams who at the time were behind Alpine. In the case of Piastri, that was even before he had even driven in Formula 1. Looking from the outside, it feels like Alpine has always felt like a bigger step up for the drivers than it really is. I think they go there with the knowledge that this was once a championship winning team, that this is also a manufacturer with their own power unit, and also with fairly stable funding from the Renault side. But when they get there, it seems like they get disillusioned very quickly. This season, the lineup of Ocon and Gasly has been exactly what I expected it to be. Going into the season, I knew that they were going to be close. I knew that we'd see a little bit of tension at some point, and it comes as no surprise to see them shoulder to shoulder in the standings, with Gasly slightly ahead. They feel like the perfect lineup in terms of quality for where Alpine are right now, but not quite good enough to break them into the lineups of the teams ahead of them, apart from maybe Aston Martin with Lance Stroll. Despite Piastri being a rookie, I genuinely don't think that McLaren or Aston Martin would swap him for either Gasly or Ocon. And so it leaves them again in this weird middle ground where they're better than most of the drivers behind them, but not quite good enough to rival the drivers ahead of them. And now, for where the team is right now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The drivers at Alpine are by no means a problem, and actually they're probably one of the team's biggest strengths. This season, both Ocon and Gasly have scored podiums in Monaco and Zandvoort, with Gasly also scoring a podium in the sprint in Spa, and both of them have qualified a season-high 4th, with Ocon in Monaco and Gasly in Spain. Going into the season, given their history growing up, and also Ocon's sketchy history with teammates as well, there was a lot of speculation about whether or not we'll see both of them blow up as well. The collision in Australia was a whole load of nothing, but we did start to see a little bit of tension in races like Suzuka and Vegas, when the strategy has gone in one driver's favour over the other. I think it all comes back to the main premise of this video, which is that just as the team has been fighting with absolutely no one, the drivers have also only really had each other to fight with in the championship. I think who beats who at Alpine is massively important to each of the drivers because with the instability that is just inherent within that team, I just get the sense that the drivers are a little bit insecure of their position at the team, and so beating the other straight away gives them the mental edge that they're almost undroppable compared to the other driver. For where the team is now with the car that they have been given, I don't think the drivers could have done much more. They have left the season with a respectable 6th in the Constructors, they have scored a couple of podiums, they have also had their fair share of reliability problems as well, which is just classic Alpine, and in general they've had a very Alpine season. But that's the problem. Going forward, I still have my doubts about what this team can actually be. We saw the incredible jump that Aston Martin were able to make over the winter break, and even McLaren this season went from having a knocked out of Q1 car to challenging Red Bull for poles and wins car by the end of the season. And no one I think expects Alpine to make the jump that Aston Martin and McLaren have made, but on paper there's nothing that those teams have that Alpine don't. In fact, even if the teams behind Alpine like Williams and Alfa Romeo close the gap in 2024, I still think that their driver lineup, which is better than both of those teams, could still make the difference in a tight midfield battle. This team still has a lot of potential. They are always able to make decent cars. On an operational level, the people trackside and at Enstone are very good. In fact, I actually have some friends that work for Alpine, and their driver lineup I think is arguably the best thing about them. Or whether parent company Renault can or even knows how to harness that potential and turn them into a winning operation has been the biggest question. Their erratic ownership, which has brought about this unstable management, I think has been at the heart of the problem for a long time now. There is so much to like about Alpine on paper, but as we have seen now in 2021, 2022 and 2023, they are still less than the sum of their parts. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.